Into the D2 Baseball Podcast. Robert Fry here today, joined with Thomas More head coach Cole Schaefer. Coach, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Robert. Man, I'm super excited to get the opportunity to come on here today. I've been following you guys on social media for a couple of years now, and what you guys do for our game is tremendous. So more than happy to jump on with you here today.
High appreciation for that, Coach, and high appreciation for now you and your personal goals now to say, be a head baseball coach at a university. Talk a little bit about that process to ultimately becoming the head coach at Thomas More.
Yeah, I mean, definitely something that I've always been working towards, and to say I've been, working towards this for a long time probably isn't truthful. I'm only 27 years old, so probably one of the younger guys to receive an opportunity like this. But definitely always something that I've been chasing through my short coaching career at this point in time, and being able to get to this point and sit in this chair is an honor for me to be able to do it. And, I'm thankful for the university taking a chance on a younger guy like me to lead this thing into the next era. So been really, really cool experience. And, the community here is great. The campus community, the actual community in town here in Crestview Hills is tremendous. And getting into Florence, where our beautiful stadium's at, is great as well. So everybody here has been, tremendously good to me, whether that's in the athletic department or on the faculty side, or people down at the stadium, and whoever it is. It's just been a really good experience so far.
And you mentioned the community, you mentioned Crestview Hills, the campus. What were your initial impressions of the program and the campus/community? Since you started and present day.
Sure. I've had the opportunity to play against these guys, 8 times in the last 2 years. And I think my impression of the program, without having not known too much about it, I'd known the prestige and the good reputation of the program and their winning ways when they were at the Division III level, mainly because they were playing in a conference that was a lot of teams kind of close to where I grew up at. So I'd known about that and their success. So when I got this job, there was a lot of people from my area that played at some of those Division III schools that had reached out to me and said that, that's Thomas More. That used to be the Pac juggernaut back in the day. So, it was always great to hear stuff like that. And then, you get into the community, and the people on campus are tremendous. So yeah, the university is set up in a really unique situation with, the previous athletic director, Coach Jim Connor, who our gym is named after. He was the head baseball coach and the athletic director here for about 30 years. He's since passed away or retired and passed away, but his son is now the athletic director. His son actually played baseball here for him. And he's probably been the AD here for, 20, 25 years at this point. And then our associate athletic director, Jeff Hetzer, was the head baseball coach here for 19 years. So, everything that you've heard about Thomas More and their success at the Division III level in the 2000s, I think 2000 to 2019, that's all him. So having him as a resource for me in the athletic department, if I need to go over there and ask him a question, he's been more than accommodating to all that and has been great to us. And, our athletic trainer that worked with baseball was a pitcher here, and we've got a guy working in sports information that was a baseball player here. So it's really kind of unique that we're set up where, a lot of the people on the administration side of athletics have some sort of really specific tie to the baseball program.
And, to continue on to that specific tie, talk a little bit more about that impact of having people in your administrative department know the game of baseball and understand, the inner nuances of baseball that maybe can help your program reach the next level.
No question. I think it's important in more ways than one. I think most importantly, a lot of the people that are in the athletic department have those ties to baseball. They were here when the program was really flourishing. So they know what it looks like, and they kind of know what needs to be done to get it back to that point. And I mentioned Jeff Hetzer. He's the main point of contact for that. He was the guy in charge when they were winning a bunch of games and going to regionals and winning conference championships. So again, leaning on him has been something that, I'm really fortunate to have in my situation as a young guy. I think it's good for anybody to have somebody that's going to fill that mentor role for them, but to have somebody that was the head baseball coach here for almost 2 decades is invaluable in my opinion. And just everything else, like you mentioned, there's a lot that go into, highly functioning baseball program that's going to have success at a high level. And that's everything from understanding the business end of it to creating really good relationships with alumni and other people in the community that want to see the program do well. And a lot of those people have those connections. So they've been really good for me, kind of serving as a bridge between myself and those alumni or those potential donors or anyone that wants to get involved in our program and continue to see it push forward.
And, part of your coaching journey, you were previously at Ohio Dominican, another team in the GMAC. And, last season was a great season in terms of, leading the GMAC in home runs, RBI, walks, setting a conference record with 292 base on balls, and then finishing the top three and a few other metrics. What of last season that was such an impact to Ohio Dominican that could translate over to now at Thomas More?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it right there. The offensive prowess of that program in the last couple of years is something that we were super proud of, and we maybe did it in a little bit more of an innovative way. Our program there offensively was completely based around plate discipline and swing decisions, and kind of really getting into the weeds of what that means for every individual, and ultimately what that leads to is creating a very individualized offensive approach for every player that was in our program. So, I think the days of just sitting on the fastball in the outer third and reacting in, I think that will always have its place. And I think that's really good for younger hitters as they adjust. But I think really to be successful with, a lot of the talent that's on the mound, not just in this conference or in this region, but in the entire country in Division II baseball, you got to start playing the game a little bit of a different way. So for as talented as these guys are on the mound, and, we ran into a kid in the conference tournament that had been up to 100 miles an hour and just stuff that you didn't used to see in Division II baseball. You got to find a different way to play the game. And for us, that was dominating swing decisions and plate discipline. So that leads to taking your walks. And when you start taking your walks, that means you're probably going to be swinging at better pitches. And when you swing at better pitches, you're going to slug a little bit more. So, the goal going into last season for us at ODU was to lead the GMAC in walks. So that would have been going from 9th in the conference in 2024 to leading it in 2025. And not only did we lead it, we broke the single season GMAC record for walks and then ended up leading the conference in home runs to boot. So, I think that was a philosophy and an offensive system that I, really grew to like and trust. And I felt like that was really good when you don't have a cookie cutter type of player in the program, which most people at this level don't. You're always going to have your programs that live and die by the home run. And, I think that's great. And we just weren't set up that way, and we're not set up that way here. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think the best thing that we can do for our program is to find that non-cookie cutter approach to hitting and making sure that everybody we have on our roster that is going to touch a baseball bat for us is going to have the ability to go out and have success because they have that individualized program for themselves.
And to kind of branch off of that, now in a head coaching chair, how involved are you going to be with the offense, compared to in the past where you're an assistant and that's kind of like your main priority, but now as a head coach, kind of what's your involvement with that and how do you plan to, incorporate the entire coaching staff or, whatever side of the ball it is, whether it be offense, pitching, defense, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I'm going to continue to run the offense as the head coach, and that's just kind of something I wasn't willing to give up at this point in time. I think there's a lot of stuff that falls on the plate of the head coach, and you start to wear a lot of different hats, and I'm definitely learning that side of it. I think the offensive side is something that I'm really comfortable with, and I think I'm pretty good at teaching that end of it in our philosophy. So, for me, it was kind of a no-brainer to do that. I was actually listening to Greg Mamula from the University of Delaware talk a couple weeks ago, and he's actually in the same situation where he's the head coach and the hitting coach simply because he wasn't ready to give it up, and that's kind of where I fall into it. But I think to do that and for the rest of the staff to be successful, I hired an assistant who came with me from Ohio Dominican who's going to be leading our pitchers. And he's doing a tremendous job with that, and he's got full autonomy for that side of it. At the end of the day, my name goes on the lineup card, and I'll be the one making the decisions. But he's with those guys, in the foxhole every day, and he's solely the guy leading that development program. So, A lot of the decisions that we make on the pitching side, he's going to have a ton of input on it because he's the one that's with those guys every day. And then we also hired a graduate assistant that's helping me out on the offensive side and working with some of our guys positionally as well. So it's a staff of 3 guys, so it's maybe a little bit smaller, but it's 3 guys that I trust. And Coach Hunt, who I brought with me, has been running the recruiting, and he's just been recruiting a really, really high caliber of player here. And I think with where we're set up geographically, being able to pull out of Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, and then get down into those Lexington, Louisville areas and continue to recruit the Columbus area really hard because we have those connections. I think it has a chance for us to put together some really, really talented classes that are branching out in every direction.
And, speaking of recruiting, that really talented classes, but, part of it too is making sure that your roster is ready to go for the fall. You were hired on July 31st. Kind of what was the roster like when you were hired on, and then what kind of challenges you have to face to try to fill out that roster?
Yeah, there's some guys that after last season decided to transfer out. And they had kind of made their decisions on their next destinations before I got hired. So I never got a chance to have conversations with those guys. And then there was a handful of freshmen that decided to not come to campus. But when I got here, there was 31 guys on the roster. We've since added 1. So we're at a 32-man roster. And at this point in time, that's what we're going to roll with. If there's the opportunity to kind of add some depth through the portal at the break, then that's something we would look into. But as far as I'm concerned, there's 32 guys that are extremely dedicated to this program and want to be a part of change. So my job is to make sure I'm taking care of those 32 guys. So with that, comes the recruiting of the 2026 class, and the goal is to get to, be at 40 at this time next year. So it is going to be a bigger 2026 class. And we're well on our way to kind of filling up those roster spots and getting the right guys in the program. But right now, man, there's 32 guys that want to be here, and there's 32 guys that show up to work every day, and that fires me up. So I'm always going to be here for those guys. And I think the really neat part of it is, the seniors that are on our roster right now, they were a part of a 30-win season, 3 years ago, and having that type of winning experience is extremely valuable to the rest of the guys in the program. Some of the younger guys maybe they just don't know what they don't know. But being a winner is really important to us. I don't think that you can act like a champion until you act like a winner. So really kind of the message to the guys here in the early going part of the fall was to treat your business like a winner. And that branches out, way beyond just the baseball field. That's in the classroom, that's in the weight room, that's in the community. So we're preaching, a winning mindset and teaching these guys how to be winners every day.
And, you mentioned having a 32-man roster, a little bit shorter than a typical team, but, what opportunities does that present in terms of player development? Because, as rosters grow, it becomes that much harder to develop each individual player at a successful level.
I think it's a great opportunity for everybody in the program this year. Specifically when you're talking about the mound, there's a lot of innings to fill. In the GMAC, we're playing, what's that, 18 and 14. We're playing, 32 innings a weekend. That's a lot of innings to fill. So there's gonna be a lot of opportunities for younger guys and older guys and everybody else in between to get on the mound and be an impact arm for us, whether that's on the front end, on the back end, or bridging between those guys. There's going to be a lot of opportunities. And the same is true for the offensive side of the baseball. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for guys to, earn a job on this year's team. And I think that's really kind of all you can ask for. And with a smaller roster, we're going to have a chance to see all those guys a lot in inter squad settings. We're already seeing them a lot in practice. The groups that we're working with are a little bit smaller, so you can be a little bit more hands-on and a little bit more personal for those players. And I think that's what the program needs right now. I don't think we're trying to run before we can walk in any stretch of the imagination. So the first couple of weeks for us have been a lot about laying the foundation, changing some behaviors, but also getting these guys on the same page with what this program is going to look like moving forward. And a lot of that can be terminology. It can be physical. It can be the way we're going to think about stuff, or like I mentioned, just being a winner. So I think having a smaller roster right now is a blessing for us. But I also think it's going to create an opportunity for younger guys where, it may be baptism by fire, so to speak. And we may be throwing some younger guys in there that maybe aren't totally ready to go. But that can be a really important learning experience for those guys later in their careers.
And to kind of transition a little bit into your previous playing career / early coaching career, you spent a lot of time in the PSAC conference, a conference known very well for its pitching. But as an offensive guy, you learned quite a bit, and especially, it showcased last season with Ohio Dominican. But, when you were learning under, those different categories in the PSAC, how did that teach you in terms of offensive development and building a good offense?
I think the most unique thing about this opportunity right now, it is very similar to the opportunity I walked into as a freshman in college at Clarion University. I had the great fortune of playing for Anthony Williams for 3 years, who's now the head coach at Frostburg State, and have a ton of success there. And being a younger guy that, I thought maybe I wanted to coach. I wasn't dead set on that as a career, but, at that point in time, I thought I wanted to do it. He was a really good guy for me to learn from. And hindsight being hindsight, I wish I picked his brain more when I was a player. But I got to kind of see how he operated with a smaller roster in a situation where you're trying to change what's going on in the program. So I had a really good opportunity to learn from him and at the same time play a bunch of really quality opponents in the conference that, were winning in a bunch of different ways. Now, we were in the PSAC West, so we didn't often cross over. But when we did, we were playing, the Millersvilles of the world and, some people like that. So it was a really good opportunity for me to kind of see what else was out there and see how people were doing things a little bit differently. And then, after I was done playing there, I was a volunteer graduate assistant at IUP. So I was with Anthony Rubinski. I'd missed Steve Klein by a year. But, since then I've gotten to know Steve and Steve's a great guy and a tremendous coach. And, it wasn't surprising at all to see them end up where they ended up 2 years ago, because that guy can really coach it. I mean, he played 14 years in the big leagues. So you got to think he's got to know something. And that dude can really, really get it done at a high level. So he's done a great job there. And then I had the opportunity to go be a volunteer assistant at Cal U. So worked under Mike Conti for about a year and a half. That would have been his 27th season at the helm. And then I got to work alongside Joey Noro, who was the pitching guy there, now the head coach. And as far as pitching guys go, you're not going to find a guy that's better at his job than Coach Noro is. And I think the statistics and everything they've been able to accomplish in that program in the 10 years that he's been there speaks for itself. So I think kind of understanding the importance of pitching, throwing strikes, and getting people out. I learned a lot from watching him do his job at a really high level. And there were so many people involved with that program, too many for me to name, that had a really big impact on me, as a baseball coach, but also as a person. Nelson Cooper is a guy that was extremely involved in the community of Pittsburgh and helping out with youth baseball. And he runs his own travel organization for kids kind of around the Pittsburgh area. And he does an unbelievable job. So he's been a great friend to me, and I've learned a lot from him. Same thing with Coach Noro. But I got to a point where I think I needed to kind of experience something a little bit different. The PSAC at that point in time was all I'd ever known as a player and as a coach. And the PSAC is a unbelievable conference year in and year out, constantly putting a team in the World Series, competing at a really, really high level regionally. That's a really, really good conference. So it was a great thing for me to be a part of as a player and as a young coach. And then when I was looking for that next thing, I had the opportunity to go down to LSU Shreveport, which is coming off of a 59-0 season in a national championship. And when I went down there, they were coming off of back-to-back World Series appearances. So it was a great opportunity for me to step into something that was a lot different. It's still baseball at the end of the day, but the ins and outs of the program and how things are run on a day-to-day basis and the development plan was a lot different. So that was really valuable for me to get experience like that. And that kind of segued into me having the opportunity to go be a head coach in the Great Lakes Summer Collegiate League in Columbus with the Licking County Settlers. TJ Lyons took a chance on me at 25 years old to be a head coach. And that resulted in me getting an assistant job at ODU, where I spent 2 years, and now I'm here.
And now to kind of talk a little bit about, Thomas More itself and the facilities. How excited are you to play home games in Florence with, such a nice field?
It's an unbelievable opportunity that's very, very unique at this level of baseball. I think there's some other schools out there that maybe will share a professional affiliate or a facility with an affiliate. And sometimes it can be difficult to, sometimes you get lost in the shuffle a little bit with that stuff. We're really fortunate to be sharing this facility with the Y'alls, where we're both essentially 50% occupants of it, and we don't overlap. So during our season, we've got 100% priority. During their season, they've got 100% priority. So, for us, that means we've got full access to the facility. And what that facility includes is a beautiful locker room, state-of-the-art locker room for our players that is decked out in Thomas More branding, and a great place for them to hang out before practice and have that bonding time with each other. Super fortunate to have that. But we also have indoor cages and an indoor weight room in the stadium. So when we can't get stuff done on campus because of class conflicts, when it comes to team lifting, guys are able to stick around after practice and do those team lifts or do an extra lift or what have you. And then that stadium is also outfit with TrackMan, which we use. So we're one of 2 schools in our conference that use TrackMan. And that goes a long way for development, but it also goes a long way for hopefully creating opportunities for our players beyond college baseball. Because, the professional baseball scene has certainly moved more towards data and analytics. And that's not the end all be all. You still got to be able to get it done on the field. But when you're talking about putting somebody on a scout's radar, a lot of these younger scouts specifically are going to be asking for TrackMan data, and we're able to provide that for our guys, which I think is an awesome opportunity. And that's just talking about stuff we have at the stadium. Campus is 10 minutes away, and we've got, a beautiful campus that's kind of in more of a rural setting. So it's a smaller town. Kind of reminds me of where I grew up a little bit, which is neat. But, these guys have the opportunity to have really good face-to-face relationships with their professors. We're 14-to-1 student to faculty ratio. So when it comes to the academic side of it, Thomas More is the number 2 school on return on investment for a degree in the state of Kentucky, which means our graduates first year out are going out and making more money than everybody else with the exception of one school. So the Thomas More degree means something. And in the process of obtaining that degree, our players are going to have the opportunity to have those face-to-face relationships with professors, get to know them, create those connections, and ultimately that's going to impact their success as a human being moving forward. Because for us, this is so much more than just baseball. This is about creating an unbelievable experience for them that's going to impact the next 40 years of their life. This is the best 4 years of their life, or that's what it's supposed to be. I want to make sure that our guys have the opportunity to experience everything that they can experience, and it's going to have a profound impact on the next 40 years of their life.
And, speaking of profound impact, maybe not 4 years, but next season, what should fans of Thomas More, fans of Division II baseball, expect out of this program going into 2026?
I think the biggest change that we've been making in practice is practicing at a very fast pace and a faster pace, truthfully, than what you're going to see in the game. So we need to get these guys caught up with how we want to do stuff. Coach Hunt and I have been working together now. I coached him his senior year, and then we coached together last year. So he kind of knows how I like to run a practice and the pace we like to try to move with stuff. So the first couple of weeks was challenging for the guys to get caught up with that. But, for us, there can't be any give on that. We need to continue to push these guys. And what we tell all these guys when we bring them on recruiting visits or, in that first initial meeting with this year's squad was, you guys are going to get coached hard. That's what you came here for. And that's how we're going to really begin to make strides. It's at the end of the day, you're going to know that we love and care about you, and you're way more than just a baseball player to us. But we're on the baseball field. You're going to get coached hard, and you're going to get pushed, and you may be pushed, a little bit harder than you're used to, or maybe than you've ever been pushed before. But it's just a matter of time before those guys start to catch up. And 4 weeks in, I think we're really starting to see that, and guys are fired up. They're communicating well. They're loud at practice, and everything that we're expecting out of them, they're doing a great job of it. So as far as what you can expect on the field, this coming spring, from what I've seen, what we've been preaching on these guys, and something I'm super proud of, and I think any coach would agree with this. I think our guys are going to play the game really hard. They've just got this insatiable energy for excellence when they show up to the field every day. And that's before practice, that's after practice, and that's certainly during practice. I think these guys are going to play the game really hard. And as a first-year head coach with a smaller roster, with a lot of younger guys in the program, I first and foremost want to make sure that I'm sending these seniors out on the right note. But beyond that, I want to make sure that we're playing the game the right way and we're playing the game really hard. And I think you're going to see that out of this group this year.
And final final question I have for you, Coach, is, you mentioned some of the people that impacted your style as a coach when you were a player and then when you were a coach. But, overall, who are some people that have impacted to get to where you are today?
Certainly, yeah. I think you could take every guy that I've worked for and worked alongside with, and I think if you put them all into a blender and poured it out, I think that's me. So, I think I've learned so much from so many different people. Again, probably it'd be unfair for me to start naming names, but, I will throw a couple out there. Kristen Tonades is the head coach at Ohio Dominican, and he's one of my best friends, and he's one of the greatest people I've ever come across in this game. And I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to work for him because he just does stuff the right way. He treats people the right way. He treats the players in his program as human beings first. He cares about them. He loves them when he needs to. And he also coaches them when they need to be coached. And I think a lot of who I am, both as a person, as a recruiter, as a head coach, and everything like that, he's got a large reason for me being that way. But I've also been around some really good people. I mentioned Coach Williams, who I had the opportunity to play for 3 years, and he was really the guy that introduced me to college baseball. So a lot of what I knew as a player was because of him. And then, Doc Nyman takes over my senior year, and really, really good. He's a player's coach and brought great energy every day and taught me a lot as I was transitioning from being a player into being a coach. And that was my senior year. But, he was bringing me into the office and we were having those conversations about, what you need to do and kind of what being a young coach looks like. And, Anthony Rubinsky gave me my first shot at it as a coach. And he had grown up in the same town I'd grown up in. We went to the same high school. So he and I had that connection there, and he ended up being a tremendous friend for me and a great guy for me to learn from getting started. Then obviously I go to Cal U and work for Mike Conti, who is an absolute legend in Division II college coaching, and work alongside Joey Noro and Nelson Cooper. Both of those guys were great friends to me. Treated me as an equal when, as a volunteer assistant, it would be very easy for them to, just kind of push the side jobs that nobody wanted to do off on me, but they gave me responsibility and they treated me really well. And I'll always be appreciative of that experience as a coach, but also as a person. And I'm appreciative for their friendship. I go down to Shreveport, work for Brad Neffendorf, who I think anyone would tell you has been one of the most successful coaches in all of college baseball in the entire country in his 5 years at LSU Shreveport, and learned a lot about the day-to-day practice organization and really, how to practice as a champion, because the expectation there every year is a national championship. And that's not the case with everybody, but that doesn't mean you can't act like it and plan that way. Worked alongside some really good guys there. Austin McNicholas, who was a former player at Texas and Shreveport, who's one of the smartest guys I've ever been around in my entire life. And then Jacob Schubert, who was our GA, who just showed up every day with that energy of trying to run through a brick wall for everybody. And, I think you put all those guys in a blender, like I mentioned, and pour it out. I think that's kind of who I am. So, all the credit in the world to those guys, being a huge part of who I am today and where I've been able to get to this point in my career. But then also, it goes back to the very beginning. My parents have done an unbelievable job of raising me the way they raised me and teaching me how to be a good person, because without being a good person, you'll just never be successful at anything. So I think without those people, and those people are my biggest supporters in the entire world, and I'll always be appreciative of them. And, I think they're excited for kind of what's to come here. So I'm excited that they're going to get to experience it, because they've been the two people that have been a part of this journey now for 23 years. So I'm excited for them to have the opportunity to come watch me do this.
And that is such high praise, Coach, and being able to talk about people who have impacted your life. But, speaking of impact, I want to appreciate you coming on to chat and talk about the Thomas More program. And we look forward to seeing how the team performs here this spring.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I think the impact that your guys' platform has on our game at Division II baseball is second to none. I think you guys cover our sport as well as anyone could ever cover our sport, whether that's dropping into just a midweek game or covering the World Series. You guys do an unbelievable job with it. And when I get back on the bus, win or lose, I'm always going straight to Twitter to see, what's going on and what you guys are tweeting about. So I appreciate more than you guys can believe. And I know I speak on behalf of a lot of other coaches at this level, that what you guys do for our game and the recognition that you guys create for our players is unbelievable. The players are deserving of it. But the fact that you guys are willing to put your time and energy into recognizing those guys, I think is incredible. So kudos to you guys on that.
Much appreciated, Coach. And that is head coach Cole Schaefer at Thomas More University. We'd like to give a big thank you to all of our regional tier Patreon members. We couldn't make it to the 9th inning without the support of all of you. You're the real MVPs, hitting a home run for the team every single time. Thank you.